This is episode 18 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and it's an exciting week in oil country. 11 Western Conference teams will travel to Edmonton today as they prepare for the 2020 Stanley Cup playoffs, and the Oilers will take on the Calgary Flames in an exhibition game on Tuesday before game one of their qualifying round series against the Chicago Blackhawks on Saturday. So I've got three passionate and knowledgeable Oilers fans joining me for a roundtable playoff preview show. You've heard all three of them on this podcast before: Shane Sander, Zain Bhanji, and Kirk Morris. Welcome back, guys.
Thanks for
Hey.
having us, Eric.
Thanks for
Hey,
having us,
Eric.
Eric.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having us.
For sure. So should be fun. There's a lot to get to. I'm excited to have all you guys back on the podcast. And we've got plenty of things to discuss today. So let's just dive right in. The Oilers finished in second place in the Pacific Division this season with 83 points in 71 games, 3 points back of the Vegas Golden Knights for the division crown. They had the 12th best points percentage in the entire league and the best among Canadian teams. But do you think this season can already be considered a success, or do they need to get something done in the playoffs? Kirk, why don't you kick things off today?
Well, I think when Ken Holland started it off, kicked it off there last May, he said the original goal was to make the playoffs, and I think me personally, I think it's already a success this year. But knowing Connor and Leon after that sting, that after the 2016-17 playoffs, losing to Anaheim the way that they did, I think that left a sour taste in their mouth, and I think they do want more. I I think once you get in, like once they get past the qualifying round, I think anybody has a shot. Me personally, but when it comes to the Oilers, I know that they want more. It's very apparent with Connor. He loves to win, no matter what, and I know that. Like I said, with the 2016-17 playoffs, it's I think it's a no-brainer. I think they want more. So that's my take on it.
That's awesome. Zane, how about you? Are the 2019-2020 Oilers already a success?
Well, you know what, Eric and Kirk, don't get me wrong. I think that this season has been quite a success already. I think the Oilers have kind of overperformed and have proven a lot of naysayers wrong. But I must say that I think it's reached a point in this trajectory or in this rebuild that I think that making the playoffs is now a minimal expectation. I think that with the management that we have in place right now, I think you bring in a guy like Ken Holland, who's got 20 years of experience as a GM pretty much in Detroit and has a lot of history winning, and you bring like a very demanding coach in Dave Tippett into a dressing room with very talented players who expect a lot of themselves. I think that they don't really claim this season already as a success. I think that what they will label as success is growth and improvement in the playoffs. And I think that they can really identify success as moving further than they went into 2016, 2017, because I think that a lot of the core of the group is still intact. And I think moving forward, there needs to be results at Edmonton. And I think that going past the second round in the actual playoffs, making it potentially to Western Conference Finals would be deemed success, because guys like Connor, guys like Leon and Nugent Hopkins, they've been around now for about 5 years minimum, and it's time for them to start going somewhere and proving the naysayers around the league wrong. So I think that you can't really claim the season already success. I think that what happens in the playoffs will truly determine how you're going to look back on the season and whether it was a failure or a success. So that's just my personal opinion, but kind of tough. But I think it's reached that point in Edmonton.
And how about you, Shane? Where are the Oilers at in your mind?
I kind of like that Zane went the other way on this, because I was like, oh man, by the time that everybody gets to me, then I'm going to have to be the one that has to change my opinion. This is exactly why I follow Zane on Twitter. But the way that I look at, and like, I'm going to get back to my prediction later, but yes, I think that you have to, one, I understand that there's a qualifier round in this, but the way that I look at this playoff is that it's a 5-round playoff. The qualifier round is you're going to be your new first round this year. And when I look at it that way, even when you look past the fact that we have a playoff or a play-in qualifier, whatever you want to call it, the Oilers were on pace to make the playoffs for the first time since 2017. And this is just the second time this team's made the playoffs since 2006. Like Zain said, this team fell well off the trajectory of where this team was supposed to be. Getting Holland, getting the new management team into place, and correcting some of the flaws on this team, getting them faster and away from that slow, big team that didn't really perform that well in the last few years. I think that we're back on the track to where this team needs to be. You look at the special teams; they made night and day improvements from having this new coaching staff come in. You can give a lot of success to Tippett, but you've got to look past him, and you got to look at the work that Playfair is doing, that Gullis is doing. You've gone from having a 9th best power play last year and a 30th place penalty kill to having now the top special teams in the entire NHL. Your power play was ranked first before the break. Your penalty kill was ranked second. And then even prorated, when you look at individual stats, this is the first time that the Oilers have had, or any team in the NHL has had, 2 players that are on pace for over 110 points. So I think Draisaitl was on pace for 127 when you prorated them. McDavid was on pace for 114. The last time that an NHL team had 2 players that had plus 110 point seasons was almost 25 years ago. That was in like 95, 96. And that was like the Penguins had Francis Lemieux and Yager, and then Colorado had Sakic and Forsberg. So you look at how motivated these guys are this year and getting this team back on the track, and the Oilers saying, hey, you know what, like, we're not done. We fell off the track, but we're back in this. I think that they're going to try to make a run for it. But right now, looking at where they are, I think that you could already consider this season for what they've gone through in the past few years to where they are today. You can look at this season as a success, and anything that we get on top of this right now is bonus. But like Zain said, this has to be the new standard. We have to be considering making the playoffs as a minimal acceptable criteria from now on.
And I think you all made very good points there. Honestly, based on, if we go back to May 7th last year when they hired Ken Holland, if they would have told us then that the Oilers will finish second in the Pacific Division and have a chance to go on a playoff run, I think we all would have taken that deal at the time. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see how those last 11 games played out, and if the Oilers would have locked down a playoff spot as opposed to having to be in this play-in tournament. But going back to 2017, when they made the playoffs that year, I think we all thought this is the beginning of McDavid's window now. They're going to be a consistent playoff team for the next decade and contend for Stanley Cups, only to fall back the next 2 years. So to get back to where they are now, I consider this a semi-success so far. I do think they need to make it past the Chicago Blackhawks. If they get to the next round of the playoffs and they lose in 5 games to Vegas or Colorado or whoever it may be, I can still say that is a step in the right direction, and we can build from that. But I don't think if they lose to the Chicago Blackhawks this year that we can consider this season a success. There were a lot of good points. Shane, you brought it up about some of the accomplishments that they had individually, and all the power play and penalty kill improvements as well. But really, they need to win at least the qualifying round to go on and call this season a success. So I'll go on to the next question now. With Edmonton being one of the NHL's 2 hub cities and the host of the Western Conference and Stanley Cup Final, the Oilers will play all of their games on home ice throughout the playoffs. But without any fans in attendance or exclusive use of their own dressing room, do you think there's really any advantage to the Oilers playing at home, or is playing at Rogers Place not a big deal for them? Zain, go ahead.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I personally think that it doesn't really make much of a difference if they're playing, whether they're playing at Rogers Place, whether they're playing at the Penguin Saddledome, the Scotiabank Saddledome, or they're playing
That's a way back
out in the
throwback.
That's a throwback for sure, yeah.
Yeah. Whether they're playing at the Garage over in Vancouver, I think Edmonton has played so great both on the road and And at home this season, I don't think it really matters where they are, who is watching the game, what ice they're playing on. I think that once they're in that bubble starting today, I think they mean business. And one kind of cool point I want to point out is that they play on the best ice in the league, as has been mentioned throughout the past 10 years at least. And so I think, if anything, that would benefit the other NHL teams that are participating in this play-in tournament. So if anything, I think that kind of evens the playing field between other teams when they're playing with the Oilers. So the ice definitely may help other teams. So with regards to fans, I think McDavid and Draisaitl really feed off, like, our two biggest guns. Obviously, they feed off a lot of momentum, a lot of energy from the crowd, and you can just feel that when they score, when they enter the zone. It's something totally different, but you still see it in practice. I don't know if you guys watched the Colby Cave scrimmage last yesterday, but they didn't really need that momentum outside of the arena to really get them going. So, not really. I don't think it makes much of a difference.
Shane, what do you think?
I'm kind of about the same thing. I think it's a yes and no. It's nice to play in your home rink and potentially know where all the bounces are on the boards, and having the familiarity of the home rink. Like, I don't know how loud that EA Sports sound that they're going to project into the building is going to be for the team, but it's nice to have the familiarity of your home rink, but you got to consider that, you're not going to have exclusive access to your dressing room. You're going to be sharing that with the other teams. The Blackhawks are going to be in there. Your team facilities, you're going to be sharing those as well. So you're not going to, and you're also not going to have, it's not going to be like a true home ice advantage throughout each of the games, kind of like when Canada plays the World Juniors in Canada. Even if they're the road team, they still kind of get a bit of a crowd boost. But without a crowd, home ice advantage through any of your games, it's kind of a moot point. I think everybody is just going to be coming in here looking to get into this tournament and just start playing. Like, there's all the outside factors are gone, and you're just playing hockey at this point. So I think it's a yes and no. It's familiarity of your rink, but all the advantages of being in your rink are just not there.
And Kirk, what do you think about the situation?
I'm with the other guys there too. I think it's yes and no to a certain degree. I think without fans and with that canned, I don't know how about you guys there about what they're going to do with crowd noise, piping it in and whatnot. But I think it's a pretty level field from what I've seen with the projections or the setups they got for both Toronto and Edmonton with the video screens, the additional cameras. I think it's going to be the same. I even heard that they're supposed to have custom goal horns for each team. I think that'd be kind of different and weird, and at the same time being in Edmonton with the old train horns. But I don't think there's a real huge advantage for apart from what Shane said with the bounces on the boards there. With the hotter temperatures here going into the summer, it might change a little bit with the ice, but other than that, I think it's pretty generic, honestly. But it'll be interesting to wait and see what happens, like with how everything's going to play out, especially just with two rinks and that much usage. And like I said, with the weather, I don't know, with the construction of rinks nowadays, I don't think it'll be a huge deal, but yeah, I think it's pretty generic. So,
and I'm with you guys too. Like, I think the bounces on the boards are going to be a big deal, and other than knowing that, having last change when they get it will be a factor. But like I said, they're not even going to have that all the time. So there is going to be a certain level of comfortability just being in your own building, even if you are in the visitors' dressing room or one of the WHL dressing rooms they have at the building. But it's not going to be the same as if they were really able to feed off the crowd. Like when we think back to the 2006 playoff run, how crazy the fans were going and how much that team fed off their energy. And even same in 2017, it's just going to be different. I don't think that this is a year where you can really judge it off anything else. It's going to be a complete mystery to everyone, and we're going to see how it all unfolds over the next couple months. But I'm hopeful that the Oilers will find some advantage in playing in their own barn, and can hopefully turn that into a long playoff run. And that actually brings me to my next question, because the Oilers finished 11 points ahead of the Blackhawks this season, but Chicago still does have some core players from their cup teams. See, do you think, or sorry, I should say, how do you think the Oilers match up against the Blackhawks in their qualifying round? Shane, why don't you start us off?
I think it's actually a pretty good matchup for the two teams. Like, you look like, despite the season series being 2-1 in favor of the Blackhawks, these two teams are pretty equal on paper, but you can kind of start to dive in to see where some of the advantages might be for the Oilers. Like, Crawford's trying to quickly get his reps in now, just in time for puck drop, and he's got to rush to. He's got 5 days before the game one, and if he's not ready to go, that Delea Subban pairing is it's not a superior duo than Koskinen and Smith. I think that they've kind of evened out with Koskinen and Smith maybe getting a little bit of a leg up there. The Blackhawks also on defense, even if you figure that Gustafsson and Seabrook weren't premier options, they just don't have the depth that the Oilers do, which is an odd thing to say when you look at the back end, because that's been a crux for the Oilers for the last decade or so. There's better puck moving ability from that back end, and I think that's going to shine through in this series, for where the Oilers defense is just going to be able to move that puck from the defensive zone right back up to the forwards, and they do it really quickly, as we saw throughout the season. The Blackhawks on that same thing, I just don't think they move the puck that well. Up front, I think things kind of even out a bit. They might not have McDavid or Taves, or McDavid or Draisaitl, but Taves and Kane aren't easy to write off. Even if they're healthy to go in that short series where pretty much anything can happen. I like the depth on both teams. Both teams have a lot of speed up front. So it should make it for a pretty exciting series. I just feel like the Oilers, like I was saying, that ability to move the puck from the back end is going to be so crucial in a short series where you're just trying to just get going off the bat, and you don't want to be down early, right? The same thing too is you look at Duncan Keith. He's not the same defenseman he was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, that guy would just pick up the puck. He's got 2-3 strides and he's gone, or even just 2-3 strides of separation. He doesn't have that much time anymore, and he's still able to move the puck, but he's got to make those decisions a lot faster than before when he used to have that time. So, where you've got McDavid and Draisaitl now on two different lines, and potentially double shifting on the fourth line with Neal and Chase on, those top two lines for the Oilers are just going to be coming at the Blackhawks in waves. And I think that Chicago is just really going to have a tough time actually trying to contain the Oilers' top two lines, and potentially even that fourth line when they get going. And we haven't even delved into the third line for the Oilers with Athanasiou, Sheahan, and Archibald.
And Kirk, what are your thoughts about the Oilers series against the Blackhawks?
Well, I got to side with Shane there too. I think it's pretty even keeled for the most part. The biggest hole I can see is the Blackhawks defense with the absence of Seabrook. I'm not sure how Calvin DeHaan is. I know he was out with an injury there for a while. And as far as what Shane said about Duncan Keith there, he's pretty much in the twilight of his career, and I don't think he'll be a huge thorn in the other side. But as far as the goaltending matchups go, with Crawford coming back into the fold on a short notice, I think he could be. Well, I think in some instances, if he's on his game, I think he can really be a deciding factor in some games. But with having COVID-19 there, as disclosed by him, with his endurance and conditioning there being thrown right back into into the frying pan, so to speak, there right off the hop. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I know that the Oilers' depth isn't the greatest after Koskinen and Smith. I would have no. I don't think I'd have any problems if Skinner had to come in for a period or so because of the depth of the defense and what the systems they have in place in front of them. So I know that the Blackhawks offense there, like their forward core, can give you fits there too with the Brinket there in secondary scoring and Dominic Kubalik there. I think he's nominated for the Calder this year. I think I can't remember where he was considered being nominated. So yeah, they do have lots of options up front. But I think on the other side of things there too, they have a lot of moving parts that you can interchange with the lines as Tippett has done all year long, especially tinkering around with that second and third line, or pardon me, that third and fourth line. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good matchup. Honestly, it's going to be fast paced, run and gun. Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch.
No, for sure. It should be a fun series. I mean, anytime you get to watch McDavid and Draisaitl do their thing, it's pretty exciting. And after 4+ months without hockey, I'm just glad to see hockey back on the ice in general. Zain, what are your thoughts on the Oilers Blackhawks series? Do the Blackhawks pose much of a threat?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Kirk and Shane have already kind of mentioned already. I think offensively, this is going to be a great matchup, especially amongst the top six forwards in both groups. 5 of each of their top 6 players have scored at least over 30 points, aside from Alex Nylander on the Chicago Blackhawks and Kailer Yamamoto on the Oilers. But obviously, if Yamamoto played a couple more games, he would have eclipsed that 30-point mark, and we'd be looking at a little bit more of a different top 6. But I think offensively, the top six groups of each team are matched up quite evenly. I think Edmonton has a lot more of an advantage when it comes down to the bottom 6 and their defense. I think that Edmonton's versatility in their bottom 6 is going to be a lot more advantageous when it comes to killing off penalties, when it comes to playing heavy power play or penalty kill minutes. I also think that just the playoff experience of our bottom 6 will go a long ways. If you look at Chicago's bottom 6, they've got a lot of young guys that don't have as much postseason experience. You got a guy like Dominic Kubalik, who was as Kirk mentioned, was nominated for the Calder Trophy with 30 goals this year, but he's only a rookie. Same with Kirby Dach. He's never played in a postseason, and Drake Caggiula doesn't really have much playoff experience either. Then if you look at the fourth line of the Chicago Blackhawks, Ryan Carpenter, David Kampf, and Matthew Highmore, those are the guys that are projected to start. I'm not really sure that they kind of have what it takes experience-wise or grit-wise to match out what the Oilers have. And they have guys like Jujhar Khaira and Alex Chiasson who are able to mix it up and really grind out a team down low in the offensive zone. And when it comes down to the defense actually as well, yes, Duncan Keith has aged quite a bit, but I really wouldn't count him out. But if you look at who else he has around him on that Chicago blue line, you got a really young mobile defenseman in Adam Boqvist, who I've seen play a couple times for the Chicago Wolves. The Chicago Wolves, their minor team. He looks quite mobile. He's able to move the puck, but I think Edmonton just has a lot more puck-moving D-men and are able to be a lot more versatile, especially with their left and right pairings. I love how Tippett sticks with his left and right pairings and handedness, and it'd be interesting to see how much faster Edmonton is able to move the puck up to the forwards than the Chicago Blackhawks are. And just with Edmonton's capability to move that puck up so quickly, we have a lot faster guys like McDavid, like Nuge, like Draisaitl, who are able to just come in streaking against those younger and maybe slower-footed defensemen like Oli Mata and Slater Kuku on the Chicago Blackhawks. So I think that the Oilers have a lot more of have an advantage when it comes down to the bottom 6 and their defense too. So just echoing what everyone else said.
Can I add one more thing? Just building off of what the others have already said. Just looking at Chicago's back end and just the assessment that we've already had for it, it always brings back to mind that story of Ron Wilson, when he was coaching the Sharks in 06 and the Oilers played them, San Jose came out with that 2-0 lead early in that series, and everybody was counting the Oilers out. But in games 1 and 2, Raffi Torres and the Oilers' fourth line with Winchester and all those guys, they were out just hammering that Sharks defense every time they touched the puck. By the time we got to game 3 and 4, every time a Sharks defenseman went back into the zone to do a puck retrieval, they were already looking to see who's coming to hit me. Is it Torres? Is it Winchester? Who's coming to hit me? Because the Oilers were just so physical on them. Mm-hmm. That turned the tide, and that ended up being what became kind of the Sharks' undoing, is that they were just too afraid to get hit. And so I think early on in this series is that the Oilers just have to get in there. They have to get those big bodies like Cassian. They got to get Sheahan, Archibald, Kara, and Chase on to actually start getting into the zone and start hammering those guys as soon as they get the puck, because then they'll start coughing up. They'll start making mistakes. Boqvist, a nice young puck mover that's just kind of coming into his own in the next few years here. You've got to get on those guys and not give them any opportunity to really have a couple of extra seconds to make those puck decisions. And I think that's going to be, building off what everybody said, is going to be like a big point in this series.
No, that's a good point, Shane. I mean, they're going to have to be physical on them too. And all I'll say, just to wrap up on this question, is I'm glad the Oilers are playing the Blackhawks in 2020 as opposed to playing them in 2010. But at the same time, we can't take them lightly, because we've seen number 8 seeds take out number 1 seeds in the NHL before. And when you have players like Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, anything could happen. So a number 12 team could take out a number 5 seed. I have a couple of friends that follow NCAA basketball. I pay attention just marginally when the Final Four is on, but I've heard that the number 12 seed is a bad matchup for the number 5 seed in college basketball. So hopefully that doesn't translate over to the Stanley Cup playoffs as well. But going into the playoffs, I think it's fair to say the Oilers have greater forward depth than they've had in several years, which means that there's actually real competition for spots, and Dave Tippett has multiple options when it comes to putting together his lineup. So I'll ask you guys, which players should be on the Oilers' top 2 scoring lines for Game 1 on Saturday? Kirk, take it away.
Like I said before in the last question there, I think that it's pretty interchangeable with the lines that Tippett has been using all season long. But honestly, you got to go with what you know best. I know that the RNH Dry and Yamo line was successful for a nice period of time there towards the end before the shutdown, but there's lots of rumors saying that RNH is going to be playing with McDavid and Cass. I think that'd be my top line pick. And then, like I said before, not to sound like a broken record, but you could use Ennis with Dry and Yamo, or you could use AA with Dry and Yamo. I think Tippett, I think in that exhibition game, he's probably going to tinker around and see what will work best. But you got to go with the flow. In a game when they do start playing Chicago, it's anything goes.
I gotta lock you down though. I gotta get a prediction for you on tape, man.
I'm just going to go with RNH, McDavid, Cass, and then AA, Dry and Yamo.
For sure. And Zain, what are your what's your top 6?
I just want to correct myself from the previous question. The Chicago minor league team is not the Chicago Wolves. It's actually the Rockford Ice Hawks. So I just want to correct myself there.
It was Vegas, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Vegas's. Yeah, now Vegas has a new team actually.
I was gonna say we should just let that one. I kind of picked up on that, but I was like, we'll let it slide. We haven't had hockey before, we're just as rusty as everybody else.
Yeah, we're all exactly. We're trying to get back into midseason form here, right? So, but as for my top 2 lines, I think that Dave Tippett's going to stick with what he has right now, just heading into the bubble. I think Dave Tippett is a guy who likes experience, which is why I also think that he's going to stick with Mike Smith in net because he's got a lot more playoff experience than Mikko Koskinen. But for the forward lines, I think he's going to go with Ennis over Athanasio in that second line left wing spot, just because Ennis has 19 playoff games. He's performed pretty consistently all season long, and Athanasio hasn't really, earned his way up onto that, up into the top six role yet as a part of the Edmonton Oilers. Who knows? The playoffs could be an emergence for that. He's obviously scored a lot of goals in the past couple of seasons, so he has that in his utility belt. But I would say that McDavid and Nugent Hopkins look quite sick throughout training camp, and I would love to see that. I love to see them work those give and goes around Duncan Keith in the play-in series. So, and I loved Zach Kassian on that line as well too. I think he opens up a lot of space for those players. I was a fan of that dynamite line, a huge fan of that dynamite line with Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto, but I think McDavid will definitely benefit from having Nuge on his left flank, and a lot more of a different offensive options that Chicago will have to face. And I love how Athanasiou can maybe move up and down the lineup just to throw a different look at the Chicago D and maybe get them a little bit muddled up too. Because when you have McDavid and Athanasiou hounding down on you on 2-on-1s, there's not many people in the league that are going to catch up to you. So I like the versatility that currently exists on the roster, but I'm going to stick with Tippett, what Tippett has right now, and go status quo with Ennis and Draisaitl and Yamamoto and Nuge, Cass, and McDavid.
Awesome. And Shane, if you were behind the bench, who's your top six forwards?
Well, I see now we're doing the whole lineup, so I might as well do the whole lineup too.
Sorry guys.
I think it's pretty much just status quo as to what we see here. Just like Zain, I think that Tippett's familiarity with Smith is going to give him the nod for game one. So just based off of where we're going to go for game one, I think it's going to be Smith getting the nod over Koskinen. Who knows? Maybe Koskinen will come in. I believe that they'll probably end up doing a game here, a game there, kind of doing the Minnesota thing from 2003 when they had Rolison and Fernandez just rotating back and forth. You lose, you're out of the net. You win, you stay in. On defense, Klefbom Larson, Nurse and Bear, Russell and Benning from what it appears to be the pairings, and then with Jones cycling in, I think maybe you'll see Bouchard or Broberg maybe get a game, just like Griffin Reinhardt. There's a throwback name for you. Did in 07. But up front, status quo. RNH, McDavid, and Kassian with Ennis, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto. Now, when I look at this, I say that this will be the start from where we go in game one. But halfway through the first period, we could start seeing some shuffling around. I think that those guys on the left side there with RNH, Ennis, and Athanasiou, those guys are going to rotate until we see a click. I think that we have to look at Tippett's coaching philosophy in terms of pairings. Like he's stuck with his pairings in terms for the most part of the season, I'll say, with McDavid and Kassian being together, Dry and Yamamoto being together, Sheahan and Archibald being together, and it even looked like Neil and Chason, or even Kara and Chason were together for most parts of the year. So pairings will stick together, but I think the names on the left side you'll start to see some juggling, and they'll be sliding up and down the roster as the playoffs adjust. And I'll save a thing for one of the further questions that you have. But.
Well, all I'll say is that I would like the Dynamite line to stay together too. That was arguably the best line in the NHL in the season's second half. But Tippett is clearly trying to spread the wealth out a little bit and give McDavid a high-end winger as well in Nugent Hopkins. And let's not forget, they played together back in 2017-18 and at the 2018 World Championships, as well as for a short time in 2018-19. It's just that Nugent Hopkins, in my opinion, looked as good as he's ever looked when he was put with Draisaitl and Yamamoto this season. And I believe he was top 5 in scoring after Christmas. So it's hard to take that guy off a line that's producing at that clip. And I wouldn't be surprised if those guys end up back together. But I'm sort of thinking the same as you guys. Like Nugent Hopkins will probably start with McDavid for game one, and we'll see where we go from there. The next question I have for you guys is a real simple one. Who will lead the Oilers in playoff scoring? And bonus points if you predict the right number. I'll give you a shout out on Twitter in a month or two, or whenever the Oilers playoff run is done, if you nail it. So, Zane, you can go first.
So I'm going to go with a bit of a wild card here. Maybe not so much of a wild card since he's one of the top 3 producers on the Oilers, but I'm going to go with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I think that his experience, his cerebral play, and his leadership will kind of come to fruition, and I think we'll see a lot of that throughout these playoffs. He's been through a lot of trying times here in Edmonton, and I think he's ready to kind of just burst out of this bubble of the basement dweller syndrome and really elevate to the next level and help this team get to that contention level. So I think Nugent Hopkins is going to kind of really benefit from playing with McDavid also. And I don't really see him splitting up from McDavid throughout these playoffs. I think that line's going to work really well. But in terms of putting a number on it, I'm really bad at predicting.
Well, if you put a number, you might be tipping your hand at how far the Oilers go, unless you think he's just going to have an unreal first round. But yeah, you don't have to. It's just for fun if you want to toss a number.
Eric, that's half the battle here, man. But like, yeah. I guess one of the later questions we'll get to how far we think that the Oilers will go. But I'm gonna kind of say 16 points is where Nugent Hopkins kind of finishes off with. I think that's going to lead the Oilers with McDavid not too far behind because he'll probably be racking up some assists to go along with wherever Nugent Hopkins puts the puck in the net.
For sure. And don't forget, McDavid finished third in team scoring in the playoffs 2 years ago when he was just shadowed so heavily by Kessler in that series against the Ducks. And I think Mark Letestu actually finished second on the team in playoff scoring that spring. So it shows you anyone can jump up and have a good playoffs. Next up, Shane, what are your thoughts? Who leads the Oilers in scoring this summer?
I'll go with McDavid, and I'll throw 1.16 points per game. I'll put that in there.
Oh, okay. You're doing it that way.
That's pretty exact.
Yeah, I figured. You know what? I'll go that way. Okay, I'm aiming here.
So you're still saying he's going to have a decrease from his regular season production?
I think that's just because of how tight the checking is in the playoffs, right? He'll still lead the team in scoring. That's still over a point per game. But, when he played against the Sharks, you had Vlasic on him. You had Burns on him. You had, the Sharks shadowing him with Couture. And then the second series, he's got the Ducks top pairing on him with Kessler. Like, they're all over him. You watch any of that footage back from that series, even going back to his days in Erie when he was playing in the playoffs in the OHL, teams would just come in and have like 2 or 3 guys that would just be married to his wing that would just stay with him, right? So I think that the scoring in the playoffs is going to get a lot harder, but he's still going to be the one that's going to be leading the Oilers through. Draisaitl took a lot of his spotlight in the regular season, and there's a nice, healthy and respectful competition between the two of them. They're the top 2 players in the world right now. And I think right now, since coming back into camp and just doing training camp and having the scrimmages going, McDavid's just looked unreal. And he looks like he's just found himself another gear. He looks faster, like Ennis was saying. He looks hungry. He looks like he's ready to go, even considering maybe he didn't have the breakup playoff performance that he had in 2017. So I think there's a lot of factors here that are going to make him motivated and ready to go to kind of lead the Oilers through in this playoff.
Well, since the Oilers are going to sweep the Blackhawks, I guess that means Connor's only getting 3 points in the first round. I was thinking to be a little north of that, but Kirk, why don't you round out the group? Who's leading the Oilers in playoff scoring?
I gotta throw it back again to the 16-17 playoffs and Draisaitl. I think he's just going to continue to accelerate his production from the regular season. Having him on a separate line rather than teamed up with McDavid, I think that's gonna, like I said, once again with the depth, it's gonna give Chicago fits right off the hop. I'm gonna predict that he's gonna score 19 points in the playoffs. And just a little side note, I hope this happens too. I as a wild card producer, I hope Athanasiou just tears it up. I would love to see him like just rack up a whole bunch of goals just to get his confidence back and really just shine. I love that pickup at the deadline. What Holland did for especially with Athanasiou and Ennis. I hope that Andreas really really comes into his own there with this group during the postseason.
Well, you might have a similar answer on the next question, but I'll just say I think Connor will lead the playoffs in scoring too. I'm gonna put him at 23 points, which I think would result in a pretty deep run. But like I said, anyone can step up in the playoffs, and let's just hope the Oilers are in a position to go on a long run. But when you first said 19, I thought you might have meant 19 goals, and that would tie the NHL record for goals in a playoff year. So maybe this year with the expanded format, someone actually scores 20 goals in the playoffs for the first time.
Yeah, you never know. Like, the way Leon's been playing this year.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would be wicked, man, for sure.
But the next one I have for you guys, I don't know, every year or two, there seems to be a player who comes out of nowhere and has a performance for the ages in the playoffs. We obviously expect guys like McDavid and Draisaitl, who are superstars, to rack up a ton of points. But beyond those two, who do you think could be a surprise hero for the Oilers like Fernando Pisani was in 2006? Shane, why don't you start things off?
Just going back, building off what everybody else is saying, it's the whole thing really comes down to matchups, right? RNH, McDavid, and Draisaitl are going to get a lot of attention in this series. And even when you go through the rest of the playoffs, if you get past the Blackhawks, you're going to be staring down the barrel with like the Blues, the Avs, the Golden Knights, the Stars, or whoever it might be. And they're going to end up going after matchups and going after the top three guys. Yamamoto for me is one guy that just you watch how he played in the regular season. He always just seems to be lingering around. He's kind of just almost like forgotten about when we talk about the Oilers' top six sometimes. And I think if the Oilers go on a run, he could be a guy that could just have like a sneaky good playoff, just like Letestu did in 2017. Just a guy that just got a lot of points on the power play or just always found himself to be in the right spot. And then building off the whole thing about matchups, Andreas Athanasiou, since he was picked up at the deadline, he's been kind of lackluster. He hasn't really found his place in the lineup just yet. But him starting on the third line, I don't really see it as a big negative as some people might be seeing it. Because I remember, Eric, earlier in the summer, we were talking about potentially having Athanasiou playing in that top six with Draisaitl and Yamamoto, with RNH playing up with McDavid. And we were talking about, we paid a heavy price to get him. They obviously want a return back for this, but he just hasn't found his game yet in Edmonton. He hasn't found his place in the lineup. But I think having him start on that third line, and having him potentially have those matchups against Oli Mata or like a Slater Cuckoo, not the fleetest of feet defenseman that can make mistakes in their own zone and in their coverage. Those are guys that are going to allow Athanasiou maybe to kind of reinvigorate those parts of his game, which is the puck carrying, the speed, the finding his way to the net, and maybe start to build his confidence and get his confidence going. So if he can kind of find his legs and his place in the lineup just within that first little bit of the series, I think this could be his breakout this year.
Definitely. Kirk, how about you?
Like I said, Athanasiou, I hope, really breaks the mold and gets out of that funk where he was earlier in the year. Another person I'd really like to see kind of chip in his own way would be Archibald. And I think even that third line, like just kind of what Shane was saying, I think the production of that third line could really be dangerous with Archibald being kind of like Yamamoto, small, quick, and can really chip in when it's needed most. So I'd say I hope Archibald really, shines as well.
And Zain, who's your surprise playoff hero for the Oilers?
Kirk, I love how you brought up Archibald. Archibald's been one of my favorite players to watch all season long, and I'd love for him to have a big playoffs too, but I actually think that James Neal is going to have a really substantial playoffs.
Deal.
this year. Yeah, the real deal, James Neal. He's been taking a lot of reps at that forward net front presence on the power play, and I think that getting a lot of traffic to Corey Crawford is going to be key on that power play. And I think James Neal does a great job of doing that. He's done that all season long, especially when he came out fresh in the beginning of the season. I think he'll be coming out fresh again after this long pause. And for an older body like him, I think he kind of needed that time to just get healthy, recoup a little bit. He actually has just had like his first summer off after going to the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row, and I think that he's really benefited from this extended time off, and I think we're going to see a lot more skating out of him too. And I love how Shane brought up how Draisaitl and McDavid might be double shifted to kind of center that fourth line as well too, just to give Chicago another look. And so I think James Neal might benefit from playing alongside those guys here and there too. But I think his presence on the power play will be key, and I think his veteran leadership will also go a long ways and showing the kids how to grind it out in the corners, how to how to effectively work the dump and chase in a playoff atmosphere. I think that's going to be crucial. So James Neal is my big guy for this playing round and for the rest of the playoffs, to be honest.
That's a good choice too, and I didn't even think of Neal, but for me, I'm just sort of leaning towards Athanasiou as a guy who could surprise. I mean, he's playing for a contract too. He's making an impression on Oilers fans really for the first time because he had such a short window of time with the team after the trade deadline to sort of establish himself as a player here. And this is a good window and for him to show what he's capable of. And look, he scored 30 goals last year. He's one of the fastest players in the league. This is an opportunity for him to make an impact. And if he can contribute to the Oilers' success in the playoffs, then that's going to go a long way to help him in terms of getting a new deal and as well as looking at him as a piece for the future that the Oilers are going to look at for future playoff runs. So the next one I have for you guys is we're going to talk about Oilers prospect Philip Broberg. He's clearly had a strong showing at training camp, mainly because of his excellent skating ability. And although he just turned 19 last month, GM Ken Holland has already come out and said that Broberg is staying with the team for the duration of their playoff run. But I'll ask you guys, do you think there's a chance that Broberg or any of their other depth players will have a chance to get into the lineup during these playoffs? Kirk, you can go first.
Well, I was just going to throw this out here as a side question to the rest of the guys, but how many games would he play if he was called upon to play? Me personally, I think he would only play if there was injuries involved. But like I said, with the playoffs, anything can happen. Production-wise, though, I think they're top seven. It's pretty evident what they're going to put out on the ice as far as defensemen goes. So, I like I said, I only think he'll show if it's really, really needed.
And Zain, you can go next.
I think Philip Broberg would play in some games in these playoffs if the players ahead of him kind of go down with injuries or are diagnosed with COVID-19, which you really don't want to see happen. I think the type of management that we have running the Edmonton Oilers right now is more experience-based. It's more, earn your colors, elevate, develop, and then we'll play you into the system. I think for Broberg to really play, he's had to show signs of Cale Makar. I think he has to kind of be on the same level as Cale Makar to really get into the playoffs here. Just like Cale Makar did last year. He played a huge role for Colorado in eliminating the Flames. I personally don't see him kind of moving past guys like Chris Russell or Caleb Jones right now. I think that Tippett really values the in-season experience when it comes to the playoffs and knowing what's on the line, especially. I think Broberg is mainly there, although he really impressed throughout training camp. I think he's going to be there mainly for the ride to kind of get a sense of, how things are like in the NHL, build some connections, network a bit. But I just don't see him elevating past guys like Legason or Jones or Bouchard for that matter too. I'm really interested to see, if one of those guys like Benning or Russell goes down, I would like to see Legacy and kind of give Jones a run for his money to play on that third pairing. I think Legacy has looked good all training camp long, and I'm a big Legacy fan too. I love his stay at home defensive mindset that he plays with. So I think if you lose a guy like Chris Russell, who's a stay at home kind of guy, I think you kind of have to look at putting a guy like Legacy in because Benning is a little bit more looking up the ice, just like Caleb Jones is. So I personally don't think Broberg's gonna play these playoffs.
For sure. And I think Legason's a really good number 8. And if he's your 8th defenseman for the next several years, I think that's a good spot for him with the Oilers. But yeah, it's great to have competition for jobs. We talked about it for the forward ranks earlier, and it goes just as well for the defense. And Shane, how about you?
I think with the playoff, with the roster that's set in place right now, I'm kind of with the rest of the guys here that I just don't think that it's a time to really start overly experimenting with your lineup. That's kind of what the regular season's for, is to get guys some looks here and there to kind of see how they do. The Oilers have a good top 8 with the guys that everybody else has listed here already. With Broberg and Bouchard, I could see them potentially sneaking into like a game or two if there's a lot of injuries that mount up. But the guys that I kind of look at are going to be your McLeods and your Bensons, because the Oilers up front, that group that they have in the top 12, and then you add Haas as the 13th forward, guys like McLeod who offer speed and an ability to play on the PK, those are utilities that you can use in a playoff run. Benson's two-way ability in the bottom 6 might be something that they could actually utilize. The guys that have had some experience playing over here in North America that are accustomed, that have, in Benson's case, he's already played in the regular season here. We kind of know what we have with him. But I think that those two guys, just kind of looking at the law of probability, I think that they have the higher chance of getting into the lineup for a game or two. But with Broberg and Bouchard, they're here for the ride. I think that it'd be great to get them into the lineup if injuries mounted up. But you look at that Oilers top 10 of defense, that's a pretty good defense group that they have there. But I just don't see Broberg and Bouchard usurping any of those other names that were mentioned with Russell, Benning, Caleb Jones, William Lagesson as their depth defensemen. I think that the Oilers are going to keep them around, and maybe they'll sneak into a game, but I think that they'll go with some other familiar names.
Definitely. And like I said, I don't think that Broberg should be starting in the playoffs. I talked about this on a previous podcast too, that having a raw rookie just come in and play at the most important time of year is probably a bad idea. It's great for him to be along for the experience, as Zain kind of alluded to, but unless there are injuries, they really shouldn't have him in there. It's great for him to have this experience, and hopefully he'll be a big part of the future. But a lot of what we've seen from him in training camp, these are in scrimmage games. And while there's a certain level of intensity to it, it's nothing that they can simulate that's anything like the Stanley Cup playoffs. So for Broberg to make his NHL debut in that situation would be a tall task for anyone. And I don't think it'll happen, but at the very least, we've seen some real positive signs, and I think people are starting to feel a lot better about that Broberg pick a year ago now. And now we're going to get down to the final 2 questions of the podcast, the 2 most important questions, and I think this is what Oiler fans will want to hear more than anything else. So we're going to just dive right into this. How far do you think the Oilers will go in the playoffs this summer? Zain, you can go first.
So I'm going to allude to what I've answered to the first question. I think the conference finals would be deemed a success by the organization and by fans too. So I'm expecting a conference finals run potentially here. I think that the matchup that they would get after Chicago might actually play in their favor, as it could be potentially a team like Vegas, who they've kind of played well against all season long in the first round of the playoffs technically. And I would like to potentially see them hopefully play against Colorado in that Eastern Conference Finals. I think that Edmonton, if they really catch fire here, and if both goalies are playing well, and Tippett isn't afraid to have a short leash with them, I think the Oilers can make it to the to the Western Conference Finals, not the Eastern Conference Finals. Sorry. I think that's realistic. Yeah, that'd be this is the CFL already, hey. But I think the Eastern Conference Finals is a legitimate goal for the Western Conference Final. Oh my gosh, sorry guys, I'm passing out here.
It's all
But I think
good.
that's a legitimate goal for us.
I mean, how many times have they been to the conference final in the last 25 years? Only once, right? So I think Oilers fans would be absolutely thrilled to see that happen. Shane, what are your thoughts? How far are the Oilers going this summer?
I think reasonably they can win a round or two and be within the final four teams in the West. I think the biggest challenge is going to be when you come into the matchups against the Blues, the Avs, the Knights, and the Stars potentially. Those are your big four teams in the West right now, the teams that are in the round robin. And the ones that are most likely to make a deep run, the Blues are a veteran team that just won a Stanley Cup, and that team is pretty much intact from what they had last year. The Avs are a very, very quick team, and the Oilers would be having to trade chances. Would be a very exciting series. But just like Zain said, I think they match up well against the Knights. They played really well with them this season. And then the Stars as well. I think that the Oilers could actually match up against the Stars fairly well as well. So, win a round or two. And then once it gets down to it, I think they can reasonably be within the top four. And then in this year where everybody's starting fresh, everybody's starting from ground zero, and you can throw the points out the window, it's anybody's ball game this year. So could they potentially go on a run? Maybe. Could they possibly be out in 3 games against the Blackhawks? It's entirely possible as well.
And Kirk, you'll round out the group for us. Give us your prediction how far the Oilers are going.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing you and Shane said there. I think if they get past the qualifiers, anything goes. Everybody's pretty much on a level playing field. Everybody's practically healthy going into the qualifying round and the round robin seeding games. I personally, I would love to see him go all the way to the final, like in 2006, because once you're in, anything can happen. Get a couple lucky bounces along the way. Who knows? I honestly think that Colorado or Dallas would be an awesome matchup because I think they square up against those teams very well. I do not like Vegas. They honestly scared the living crap out of me. They could be very lethal, and the same thing with St. Louis. They're really deep. So I would love them to go all the way, but I think conference finals definitely.
Well, it's 2 conference final appearance predictions, so I'm hoping that you guys are going to be right. Honestly, for me, I think they'll beat the Blackhawks, and then once it reseeds, since the Oilers are the number 5 seed, they're going to play whoever the number 4 seed is coming out of that round robin tournament, who I think will be Dallas. And if that means Edmonton's playing
again.
yeah, but this time we're getting some revenge. It's been 17 years since they played in the playoffs, but if we can if we can see an Oilers Stars series where and the Oilers once again wouldn't have home ice advantage even though it is in their building, I think they could get by Dallas, and then you're looking at playing probably St. Louis or Vegas or Colorado. So it's going to be a tough hill from there. That's as far as I think they'll go. I think they'll beat Chicago, and I'm predicting that Dallas will finish 4th in the round robin. So they'll beat Dallas, and then whoever they have to play after that is who will knock them out. But we'll consider that a strong run for the Oilers and getting to win 2 different series, a best of 5 and a best of 7 this summer. And the final question I have for you guys is which 2 teams will face off in the Stanley Cup final and who takes the cup home? Shane, tell us what's going to happen.
So this is the Stanley Cup final prediction. I think this year is going to be pretty tough. Like we've all said here, it's a year where everybody's starting from ground zero and anything can happen. I'm going to be a little optimistic here. Okay, so I think the Lightning are coming out of the East, and I'll tell you why in a second. But I think I've got the Avs, the Knights, and I got the Oilers as potentially one of the 3 teams coming out of the West. I just think that with McDavid and Draisaitl, that You've got the horses to get you there. And what you need is your healthy defense. You've got 10 defensemen that are healthy, that are NHL caliber, that can get you there. And then you've got Smith, who's been able to take teams on like through a playoff. You've got Koskinen, who's actually, I think this year he started to grow on me, and even though he's had his inconsistencies, but when he's good and he's on, like, look out, right? So I think this Oiler team could really surprise a lot of people. I really like the Avs speed up front. I love the way that they can able to roll 4 lines. And just the Knights' dependability and just how close they got with Washington the other year. But I've got Tampa going in. They're actually my cup pick for this year. But I know we got another question later, so I'll go on that, even though I just gave away my spoilers.
And you're going to go next, Kirk. What's your Stanley Cup prediction?
I think it'll be a rematch of last year, honestly. But I think Boston, they're just like that bad penny that always seems to turn up. I think they just don't go away. And as far as St. Louis goes, I think personally they're just so deep. I wouldn't be surprised though if Vegas did sneak into the finals because of their goaltending tandem. I hate to say it. I thought picking up Leonard there for Vegas there at the deadline was a really, really good move by McCrimmon. And you can't deny the playoff pedigree of Marc-Andre Fleury. Like he's when he's on there too. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Boston versus St. Louis in the final.
For sure. And Zane, who's your pick?
Wow, that's bold. It's not very often we see Stanley Cup final rematches, but I think that I'm gonna share the same vein that Shane has here, and I think that Tampa Bay is gonna come out of the East as well. I think that this is kind of the make it or break it year for this group. There's going to be a lot of tough decisions that are going to have to be made. I think they're going to be a victim of that 81.5 cap that's going to be staying in place for the next couple of years here. And I think that they're going to really make a big push here. And I think if they don't really win, I think that could be it for John Cooper potentially too. So I think out of the East, it's going to be Tampa Bay, just because they also have the goaltending to get them there too. Vasilevsky is just a stellar goalie. Out of the West, I'm going to have to go with Colorado. I think Colorado has one of the deepest teams, and I think that this year we're going to see speed be the name of the game more than ever in the NHL. And I think Colorado has that speed and has a lot of different dimensions to match up against with other teams in the Western Conference. Obviously, they're led by McKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog, but they also have some great depth on their defense. I'm not really sure if they're taking guys like Bowen Byram or Connor Timmins in, but the current defense that they have right now is great, and I think that they have a lot of potential to go a far ways here, and I think that they could give St. Louis a good run for their money if they were to meet in the Western Conference Finals potentially too. So I think it's going to be Colorado just because of their depth on D and their ability to really move that puck fast and also play a big-bodied game. And I think Tampa Bay is going to be who they play in the East. So that's my Stanley Cup prediction. But as Shane alluded to earlier, it's a crapshoot this year. You can't really tell who's going to be where. I think the hardest bracket to ever predict in the history of the NHL. But I personally think it's going to be Colorado and Tampa Bay.
And there's so many tough teams. Like we mentioned that Edmonton could go on a deep run they got the horses to do it, especially if they get the goaltending. Like I said, I want to be pleasantly surprised that they're going to go that far. I've got Boston playing Colorado in the final, and you know what? I'm not a Bruins fan, but the only time I can cheer for that team is when they're knocking the Leafs out of the playoffs every year, and that's outside of seeing the Flames lose in the playoffs and the Oilers win. The next best thing is obviously the Leafs losing. And I mean, if Matthews gets a cup one day, whatever, but I don't want him to get one before McDavid. And I think that this Oilers team is poised to do it in the next few years, but maybe this year is a little too soon. But you got to like that Colorado team. They have a ton of talent too. Probably even maybe a little more talent than the Oilers at this point, even though I like our guys at the very top better than their guys at the very top. So we'll see how it goes. But I've got Boston over Colorado, and that'll be an entertaining series if it gets there. But let's just keep our fingers crossed that you guys were right, and Edmonton is going all the way to the Western Conference Final and somehow rides it all the way and wins the Stanley Cup on home ice. Although, wouldn't that be something? They get the cup on home ice in Edmonton, and there's no fans there to cheer them on.
I think you'd be seeing a lot of cases of COVID a couple days after. Let me tell you that.
I just hope it's not the only cup McDavid ever wins. The one cup he gets, and it's without fans there. But as long as he gets one, I'm happy.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you there.
They're gonna be building a statue of him at that point, right next to the Gretzky one. So that's all I had for you guys tonight, and I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show. It's always fun to talk hockey with you three. But before we sign off, I just wanted to you guys to tell everyone where they can follow you on social media and what's the best place to find your stuff. Zain, you can take it away first.
Sure. You can follow me on Twitter.
I didn't know who was going to jump in.
Oh, no, I think we're all polite Canadians here. You can follow me on Twitter at Zain Bhanji, ZainBhanji, and look out for some post-game recaps this playoff season.
I've seen you doing some brief playoff previews while you were walking too, right?
Yeah, walk and talks. I've been, I've kind of slowed down because I'm still working on my master's thesis, but hopefully the next couple of days when I go to Vancouver, I'll continue doing those walk and talks. So stay tuned for those.
Well, hey, if those videos are still out there too, look those up. Shane, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, SanderEDM. That's my Twitter account. I haven't been as active recently just because I've been working on the front line, so I just don't really have a whole lot of time to just get on Twitter and start arguing with whoever wants to yell through my kitchen window these days.
You do always provide some awesome hockey takes, though, so when you do have the time, it's always great to chat with you. And Kirk, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Skidsy78, SKIDSY78. I do have a hockey blog, and the address is recthockey.wordpress.com. I am currently polishing off my playoff predictions, and that article should be up tonight. And hopefully some more Oilers content on there too here in the next few days.
That's awesome. Well, we made it through a podcast with 4 people and talking over each other at some times, but trying to figure this out. I just want to thank you guys again for taking the time to do this. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it too. And once again, like I said, everyone, please go follow these guys. They're all awesome. And hopefully we'll be celebrating an Oilers victory over the Blackhawks 6 days from now.
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Eric, and take care, boys.
See you guys later. This was fun.
Thanks, Eric. And see you guys later.
Awesome. So for Shane Sanders, Zain Bhanji, and Kirk Morris, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out.